Let's get straight to it. The house is full. Everybody's excited about Ariana coming up to talk to us for a bit. You know, through the years, CMW's had a lot of superstars gracing its podia, but I don't think they've ever been connected to I think they've all been connected to the music industry in the past. And to the best of our knowledge, none of them has ever made Time Magazine's annual list of the 100 most influential people in the world. Not Ted Nugent, not David Crosby, and not Alice Cooper. Ariana Huffington is the president and editor-in-chief of the Huffington Post, one of the most read online news sources in the world. Et aussi, je suis très fier qu'elle ait choisi Québec comme deuxième langue, first place where she's producing a second language publication using some great Francophone journalists. She is considered to be one of the most influential people in politics and lifestyle since she started the posting in 2005. We're very proud to have her with us today. Please welcome Ariana Huffington. Bienvenue.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm delighted to be here. I have spoken at many conferences, but not as many music festivals. So I like the fact that this is part of an actual music festival. I feel that sort of in my own life, I started as a solo artist, writing books out of my own house, and then moved into a kind of indie act in 2005 when we launched the Huffington Post and took it all over the internet. And then last year we sold out and sold it to AOL and went corporate, although we didn't really. And that is really the next incarnation of the Huffington Post, which helped us bring it to Canada and helped bring me to Toronto a lot more often than before, because we launched the Huffington Post in Toronto last May, and in Quebec, in Montreal last month. And the baby is already growing, and it's fantastic to see the response from Canadians, which doesn't really surprise me because social media is a key part of the Canadian DNA. I mean, it's amazing. You're even ahead of Americans in the use of social media. So I want to divide what I want to say into three parts. And let me just start, first of all, for those of you who have not heard me before, I want to stress that this accent is for real. I say that because recently I was speaking in Fresno, in California, and I joked that I was really born in Fresno, I said, and I cultivated this accent to give myself an air of being an ethnic minority, which is very popular everywhere in the States except in Arizona. And I received 27 letters from people asking me, how exactly did you go about changing your accent? So there's a certain level of gullibility that you need to be very aware of. In fact, I've dealt with my accent all my life, and it wasn't until I moved from England, where I went to school at Cambridge, to New York and met Henry Kissinger, that I relaxed about my accent, because he said to me, you can never underestimate in American public life the incredible advantages of complete and total incomprehensibility. So that has made me relax. And what I found really interesting is that my ex-husband had a very different explanation. He said that the reason why I still have a strong accent, even though I have lived outside Greece and longer than I've lived in Greece, is because I never listen, he says. But that's actually not true. It's just what ex-husbands say. In fact, one of the key things about social media is being able to listen. And I liked what Brian Church of LinkedIn said yesterday. I was looking at some of the things that other speakers had said. He said, community is a place to interact and listen. Don't just jump straight to selling things. And that's what a lot of people, whether they are politicians or marketers, often make a mistake on, jumping into selling rather than first listening. My other favorite quote, before I jump into my own points, was from Katrina Klyer. I retweeted it today. Her title was From Community to Kinship. And she said that moving from community to kinship requires choice, interaction, and authenticity. Be a good dance partner by letting the community lead and hang in there when you have your toes stepped on. That's really great, because that's truly how I see what's happening in social media today. So first of all, the good news. This is an incredible time to be alive and be in new media, because the democratization is complete. You don't any longer have to have access to the elites to be able to be heard. You just have to have something interesting to say. You just have to be passionate about something, and you will be heard, and your message will be amplified. That's an incredible, incredible moment to celebrate. And whether it's Tahrir Square or Tunisia, or responding to Rush Limbaugh's sexist comments and getting dozens of advertisers to desert him, or in London, getting dozens of advertisers to desert the News of the World, or here in Canada, when Air Canada was not responsive after they broke the wheelchair of that boy who was traveling on the airline. The Twitter machine got into operation, and they had to respond, and they had to fix it. That's incredible. I just want us to stop and celebrate the fact that we now have this power to be heard, to hold our leaders accountable, whether they're in politics, in media, in commerce, in any sphere of life. We have that power, and it's really dramatically changed everything. At the same time, what has changed is that at the beginning of new media, old media expected people to just go to them to absorb the content. And now, what we're realizing is ubiquity is the new exclusivity, as Linda Thaler put it. When you have a good piece of content that you want many people to see, just put it in as many places as possible. Just get people to share it with each other. Put it on their Facebook walls, tweet about it. A great example is Saturday Night Live. At the beginning, everybody had to go and watch Saturday Night Live on NBC on Saturday night, and not anymore. How many of you, for example, saw the famous Sarah Palin impersonation by Tina Fey? How many of you actually saw it on Saturday Live, on Saturday, on NBC? 3 people, I think. So that's my point. If Saturday Night Live, if NBC had insisted on everybody coming to them, they would have really lost out. Now they just put a pre-roll advertising, and they can put it everywhere. They monetize it that way, and you can see it anywhere. You can see it on the Huffington Post. You can see it on a little blog that puts it up, or you can see it on your friend's Facebook wall. Again, a dramatic shift. You know, promiscuity basically may not be good in relationships, but it's very good when it comes to new media. The more promiscuous, the better. So, at the same time, look around and see how many more people are becoming connected. The expectation is that by 2020, 3 billion more people around the world will be connected to the internet. So if you look at what Clay Shirky writes about the cognitive surplus, we are suddenly going to have all that meta-intelligence, all these people who were cut out of the conversation for years, for centuries, are now going to be part of the conversation. So who knows what creativity and ingenuity will result if we do it right. And I have some warnings at the end. And of course, it's all now beyond the URL. The conversations are not happening just on sites. They're happening on your smartphones. They're happening on your iPads. They're happening everywhere. The Huffington Post is available everywhere, and we are increasingly producing content for all devices. We are launching, in fact, next month, a magazine version of the Huffington Post on iPad, which will be a weekly magazine version with the best of the original reporting and the best of blogs and the best of video that we produce. That's kind of the rising billion, as it is known, but it's actually the rising 3 billion by 2020. So if we listen to will.i.am, after all, we are part of a music festival, he kind of summed up the change. He said, in the past, people used to consume news sitting on a couch. Now they consume news galloping on a horse. They don't just consume it, they share it, they pass it on, they add to it. It's a very involved, very interactive, and very engaged experience. And engagement is the key. The key to the Huffington Post is engagement. Our CMS, the platform the Huffington Post is on, is a very engaging platform. From the beginning, our community was a very important part of what we offered and who we were. And that's why, from the beginning, our comments were pre-moderated, because we wanted to avoid the worst aspects of the internet. We wanted to avoid having trolls and takeover and having ad hominem attacks. People could be critical of each other, but in a civil environment. So we developed the most advanced pre-moderation technology, supplemented by 30 human moderators 24/7, and it's really paid off. Now we have, if you look at the comments we've had since the beginning, since we launched in May 2005 to now, we've had over 140 million comments. And it's not unusual for a post to get thousands of comments. So that's, in fact, one of the things that our bloggers love more than anything, the fact that they can engage in a really amazing conversation. And that's really, for me, what the future is going to be about. It's going to be a hybrid. The Huffington Post is a complete hybrid. We have a journalistic enterprise with almost 500 professional journalists, editors, writers, and we are a platform. And I'm excited about the journalism. I'm excited about the stories we're doing, like the story that we did here in Canada about the growing income inequalities, looking at Vancouver especially. I'm excited about the poverty series we're doing in the States with 20 of our reporters all around the country covering different aspects of poverty. But I'm also really excited about the Huffington Post as a platform, which means it's available to anyone here who has something interesting to say and to own the rights to that. So if you want to turn it into a book or a television show, as people have done, you can do it. It's yours. But this is a platform you can use to amplify the message. If you have your own blog, cross-post. It will just give you new readers. Thank you so much. We launched recently the Huffington Post in France. It was our trial run before we moved to Quebec. And it's called Le Huffington Post, and we did it in partnership with Le Monde. And we had an amazing number of blogs that were cross-posted. From a woman, for example, who had been keeping a blog about her battle with breast cancer. And she had always had a small following, and suddenly she could have a much bigger following. She could have a megaphone. So I want to invite all of you here who have something to say to just use that megaphone. And I'm going to give you my email address so you make it really easy. And it's very easy. You can't forget it. It's Arianna, which is 1 R and 2 N's, at huffingtonpost.com. So if you have anything to say, you can send it to me, and then I'll pass it on to our Canadian editors. I don't know if any of our Canadian editors... Hi, would you stand? And then maybe afterwards you can pass cards around if anybody wants to come up and say hi and find even more direct ways to blog on the Huffington Post in Canada. So moving on to the snakes in the garden, as I call them. You know, this is the digital paradise that I described, but there are some snakes in this garden. There are always snakes in paradise, remember that. So while the internet is coming of age in all the ways I described, just think of it, the early internet involved all of us staying up too late, eating too much junk food, being a little indiscriminate about where we spend time. And now we've grown up. And we want our internet experience to be much more curated. We want to decide where we really want to spend our time. And we are being a little more particular and a little more selective about what we do online. So that's the good news. The bad news is that there's been a kind of fetishization of things going viral and things trending. And people don't always ask the question, what is going viral? Is it worthwhile? How is it? Do we want to really spend a lot of time on it? It's really amazing when we just celebrate virality without asking the question, so what is it? You know, Thoreau in 1854 wrote, "We are in great haste to construct a magnetic telegraph from Maine to Texas. But Maine and Texas, it may be, have nothing important to communicate." So what Thoreau wrote in 1854 is just as important in 2012, in fact, much more important, because we need to stop treating virality as a good unto itself. We need to stop treating something trending on Twitter as a good unto itself. We need to stop living in that kind of perpetual now where everything is breaking news. I mean, I was sitting at my desk in New York recently, as I always do, watching television on mute. It's a really good experience. And suddenly this chyron came on, breaking news. So I started paying attention. The breaking news was that Donald Trump is endorsing Mitt Romney. Really? That's breaking news? That's barely news. Or I don't know if you remember the balloon boy. You see, even here in Canada, you remember the balloon boy. Well, he wasn't the balloon boy. He was an attic boy. He was never in the balloon. But it was like non-stop breaking news coverage, showing a picture of an empty balloon, even after they knew that the boy was not in the balloon. So that's really one of the big problems that social media accentuate. And there is a price to pay for that, because the best thing that I learned in my economics course at Cambridge was the concept of the opportunity cost. Every time we are doing something, we are foregoing doing something else. So it's not without a price. And that's why we need to be much more selective about how we use social media. We can use them in this completely trivializing, time-wasting, energy-wasting way, or we can use them in the aspirational way that B. Stone has described Twitter as not the triumph of tech, but the triumph of humanity. And that doesn't mean only using it for great and good things. It also means using it to pinpoint hypocrisies, to amuse ourselves through satire. There are many great ways to use it, but we need to ask ourselves this question again and again: what is it that we are communicating? And is it worth communicating? Especially at a time of multiple crises in the world, where our focus and our energy are so key. The other negative way to be using them, or at least ineffective way, is when brands or politicians try to use social media like a press release. not realizing that it doesn't work. If you're going to be effective at using social media, you need to acknowledge that has to be much more authentic, much more conversational. You need to earn the trust of your followers. You need to be vulnerable the way we ideally are in our own lives. If you make a mistake, you need to acknowledge it, ideally apologize. You know, all these things that we value in our real lives are increasingly the things we value in our online lives. It kind of our digital selves and our real selves are blending. And so it doesn't work to just put out a statement that glorifies a brand and not expect people to respond. We launched a few years ago something called sponsor-generated blogs. So sponsors would pay, and it would be transparent, to have a blog. So the first company that used it was a big hotel chain. And when the first post went up, the first comment under the post was a negative comment about a negative experience the commenter had at one of the hotels. Well, their marketing people freaked out, and they wanted to stop the campaign. We explained to them that that wouldn't really help, because the years of hiding behind a glossy ad and disappearing are over. And that person who had a negative experience would have tweeted about it, put it on their Facebook wall, and it's better to do it in an environment where the brand can respond. And that's what they did. They actually acknowledged that it was a mistake, and then they engaged, and other customers came in who had had good experience at the hotel, and it became a conversation. And that's really what is going to be the new future of marketing. The other thing that I think is, for me, fascinating, and one of the things I'm most interested in, is the way brands are increasingly recognizing the importance of being identified with a cause. I realized that in a particularly intense way one night when I was in a hotel room, and an ad came on, and it was, it started with this very soft voice, male voice, and low piano music, and it said, millions of people live life just for themselves. But is that all there is? And then it had pictures of people doing incredibly compassionate and altruistic things for others. And so I thought, hey, this must be like a beautifully made ad for the Peace Corps or something like that. It turned out to be an ad for Chivas whiskey. And I thought, you know, if Chivas whiskey is using the human longing to be of service, to make a difference, to sell scotch, then something is going on in the zeitgeist. We'd better pay attention, because often marketing is a leading indicator of what is going on. And indeed, something is going on in the zeitgeist. I remember just before he died, Jonas Salk said to me, we are moving from Epoch A to Epoch B. Epoch A is identified with survival and competition. Epoch B is identified with meaning and collaboration. And it's really important for us to realize that as we are moving into that new era, whatever we do that taps into that is going to have the wind on our back. At HuffPost, we've put a lot of resources into capturing that. We have a dedicated section called Impact, which is all about giving back, which is all about making a difference and capturing those stories. We also have a section called, very simply, Good News, and it only has good news. So that while we have spent plenty of time covering bad news, we feel it's important for people to go to a section where they can be inspired, where they can feel optimistic about the possibility of solving problems. Because frankly, I think we in the media have done a bad job at putting the spotlight on what is working. We tend to always emphasize what is dysfunctional, what is not working. You know, as they say in television, if it bleeds, it leads. And it's time for us to learn to put the spotlight also on what is working, because there's such an amazing amount of creativity and ingenuity and such a phenomenal use of digital media and technology to really help each other. I mean, I just urge you to look at some of the things that we cover constantly, like Code for America, which, based on Teach for America, has brought together engineers who want to devote a year of their lives to help local governments get more efficient. Or another favorite of mine, See, Click, Fix, which was started by an entrepreneur in Connecticut. And he has basically created a site where you can go look at a problem, identify a problem, a pothole, a street lamp that doesn't work, click and make it known that this is a problem, and then fix. People come from out of the woodwork and fix it. Or sometimes they report to the government, and once in a blue moon, the government fixes it. But even if the government doesn't fix it, often people come out and fix it themselves. And there are many, many other examples. Donors Choose is another one where people can make donations specifically about definite things that are missing in schoolrooms or that teachers need. Or Kickstarter, which is a crowdfunding group. All that is there, and yet if we're going to scale these great innovations, we need to put the spotlight on them. We need people to know about them, and we need to tell the stories that have resulted from them. Because one of the main problems with technology has been that it has led to an incredible amount of information. I mean, we really can have everything at our fingertips now. In the 19th century, it would take a week in the States for the election results to travel from one part of the country to the other. Now everything is immediately available to us. But what we're missing is understanding and wisdom. The 3rd century philosopher Plotinus, long before blogging and the internet, wrote that there were 3 kinds of knowledge: opinion, science, and illumination. We are drowning in opinion. We are drowning in science in the sense of information, but we are lacking in illumination and wisdom. And that's what we need more desperately than anything, frankly, because as you look around, there are an enormous amount of leaders who are very smart, very high IQs, very great education, making terrible decisions. So something is going wrong. Why? What's happening? Well, what's happening is that often they're completely disconnected from their own wisdom. And that's why I believe, and that's a major paradox, that ultimately we need to learn to disconnect in order to connect with ourselves, to unplug in order to recharge. And that may seem really strange coming from somebody who lives her life on the internet, who has like 3 BlackBerries. I am the ultimate BlackBerry proponent, incidentally. I am not giving it up. And RIM have been very good to me, solving all my problems. So I'm an advertisement for BlackBerry. All my friends say, well, haven't you moved to the iPhone? I said, have you tried typing on the iPhone? It's okay to take pictures, but I use it for work. So nevertheless, despite all that, I learned the hard way that we need to also recognize that the same way that every night we plug our devices in, right? Otherwise they die. The same unplugging, in our case, needs to happen regularly if we're not going to be cooked, both as individuals and as a civilization. In fact, 4 years ago, in the middle of building the Huffington Post, I had to take my daughter on a college tour so that she could decide what college she wanted to go to. And our agreement was this would be real quality time together, so no BlackBerries during the day. And so what would happen is that at night we would check into whatever hotel we were staying at, she would go to sleep and I would start working. Well, we got back home and I was completely exhausted. I got up in the morning, I sat at my desk and I felt cold, got up to get a sweater, and I fainted and hit my head on my desk, broke my cheekbone, got 5 stitches on my right eye, and it started me on this journey to reacquaint myself with sleep. And I basically have become a sleep evangelist. We have a dedicated section on the Huffington Post called Sleep that brings you the latest in medical science about sleep, the importance of it for health, creativity, happiness. I was just very proud recently to be asked to join the Harvard School of Medicine Sleep Division. And the first thing we did when we moved into the AOL offices is to open 2 nap rooms. And because we own MapQuest, we call them NapQuest 1 and NapQuest 2. And, at the beginning, when I would tell our editors, hey, in the afternoon when you're tired, just go have a 20-minute nap. Don't go have a 20th cup of coffee or a 3rd muffin or whatever. And at first, people were like, hey, I don't want to be seen going into the nap room. But now they're totally booked. We're thinking of opening a 3rd one. The other day, I must admit, I was walking by and I saw 2 people coming out of one of the nap rooms. But I thought, whatever gets people recharged is fine with me. Just don't tell HR, okay? So the bigger point about disconnecting to connect with ourselves is that ultimately that's the only way to reduce stress in our lives. And so one of the things that I'm really excited about that we are going to be launching in the next few months is what we're going to call a GPS for the soul. On the grounds that human life is such that there's never going to be a day when you are completely stress-free, when you don't ever get upset or angry or irritated, right? I mean, unless there's any saints in this room, I would love to meet them who have had days like that. Most of us don't. So the key really is how quickly do you course correct? How quickly do you move to your center? However many times you fall out of it, how quickly do you get into it? And that's why the GPS for the soul will be an app that you can download, and it will give you stress sensor information, like your breath rate, your blood pressure, your heart rate, different stress information that is valuable. It will increase your awareness about when you are stressed, and then you will personalize the app and program it with all the things that help you distress. They're different for each person. For me, it could be a particular piece of music, a poem, pictures of my children when they were young and unproblematic, a beautiful landscape, whatever it is that does it for you. And then you tell the app, I have 2 minutes. Give me something for 2 minutes. I have 5 minutes. I have 10 minutes, in which case it may give you breathing exercises or yoga postures or a short meditation, whatever. So I'm really excited about that. We are working with some great groups to develop it. And I feel that it will really help our own awareness, our own consciousness about where we are at that particular moment in our lives. Because if you look at what's happening in people's lives, very often they let the stress build and build and build until they have a heart attack. And that's considered normal. Healthy people having a heart attack in their 50s. Why don't we think that this is really tragic and can be avoided? And that's one of the reasons why I love the fact that this conference is associated with the arts, is because I think the arts are a big way of connecting with ourselves and our deeper wisdom. And I wrote a book about that in the 90s, which don't worry if you haven't heard about it, because nobody has. I called it The Fourth Instinct. And the first three instincts that biologists and psychologists all acknowledge are survival, sex, and power. The fourth instinct is the instinct that drives us to find meaning, transcendence, peace in our own lives and make a difference in the lives of others. And the arts have always helped, through time immemorial, people to do that. In fact, one of the quotes from The Fourth Instinct, I went to find it this morning, is that from the modern pilgrims lining up, sometimes for hours, outside museums, galleries, and symphony halls, are driven by more than the quest for an aesthetic experience. Consciously or unconsciously, we seek the harmony that reconciles the inner with the outer man, the soul with the world. And art, whether it's carved into cave walls or cascading down the hallways of opera houses, is a bridge between the light we carry in us but may have never seen and the darkness we know all too well. So that GPS for the soul is going to be kind of a modern way to tap into that harmony more often than we now do. So that's one of the things that, together with sleep and our sleep crusade, I think we'll be able to help people navigate this explosion of media and information all around us. I think a yellow light came on. So I don't know if that means I have to stop, but whoever is in charge of timing, if we have time for questions, that would be great. Maybe somebody... We have time? Okay, good. What? As much as you want. Oh, okay, well, I have as much time as you have. So let me just wrap up what I have to say so that we can open it up to questions, because that's the most interesting part for me. So if we take everything that I've said, from the most trivial, like sleep, and I say trivial not because it's not important, but because it's so everyday and so much part of our lives, to the most profound of how do we reconnect with our own wisdom and our own souls. It's basically all about how we can take the best of new media and take the best that new technologies have offered, but also remain aware of the snakes in the garden and the ways that if we don't watch, if we don't pay attention, it can actually ultimately be damaging. And I think women here have a special responsibility, and so if I can speak to the women in the room for a minute, the men, can just look at your BlackBerries, which you've been doing already, I've noticed. So I say that women have a special responsibility because let's take sleep. Men, for example, have equated sleep deprivation with virility. I don't know why, but I recently had dinner with a guy who bragged that he had only gotten 4 hours sleep the night before. And I thought to myself, I didn't say it, but I thought to myself, you know what? If you had gotten 5 hours sleep, this dinner would have been a lot more interesting. So as we are looking at all the major problems, both in the world and often in our own lives, that we need to solve and navigate through, let us use all that we have at our disposal, including our own hidden wisdom, to navigate through them with more effectiveness, more creativity, more joy, and yes, more sleep. Thank you. Yeah, and also, when you ask a question, would you tell us who you are and what you do and anything else? Anything you want to tell us about your digital self?
Philip Torlecki from Unext, it's a digital magazine. My question to you is, as you were sort of thinking about starting the Huffington Post, or getting into the social media realm, was there sort of one aha moment or sort of huge insight that you think you got that everybody else kind of missed?
I think that if there was an aha moment for me, it had to do with my recognition that a lot of the conversation was moving online, but that a lot of people, a lot of very interesting voices were not going to be online. Some of them because they were too old, some of them because they were too set in their ways, and that we needed to capture that. So, in fact, the first person that I invited to blog before we launched the Huffington Post was Arthur Schlesinger, the great historian. And at the time, as it turned out, he was writing what turned out to be his last book. So I called him up, I asked him to blog. He asked me, what is a blog? I tried to explain. He said to me, let me take you to lunch and you can tell me about it. So he took me to lunch at the Century Club in New York. Just to give you an idea of the Century Club, Arthur and I were the youngest people there, and he's now dead, and I'm now spring chicken. So there I was at the Century Club explaining blogging to Arthur Schlesinger, who said to me, oh, okay, he said, I don't really use a computer, but I can fax you my blogs. I said, great. And I remember when I mentioned that somewhere, some people said, hey, that's not a blog. If it's not on MT, if it's not on movable type, it's not a blog. And my point of view is that it's a blog. However I get it. Some people dictate their blogs to our editors, like Larry David from the set of Curb Your Enthusiasm, or Ari Emanuel, the agent in LA, because they drive a lot or they're on the golf course and they have an idea. We have a concierge service. I don't mind how I get it. Could be by carrier pigeon. What I want is to capture in real time as many thoughts, ideas, conversations as possible. So that was always for me a central part of the Huffington Post, that and community. And we started, of course, being primarily an aggregator, but again, with a point of view. You know, it's not just aggregating, it's bringing in our own attitude. I mean, I would tell our editors in our first trainings that you need to be able to know it's the Huffington Post, even if you don't see the Huffington Post. And I think our editors here in Toronto have done a great job at capturing that. And let me give you some examples. When, for example, Dominique Strauss-Kahn was arrested, the head of the IMF in New York, our headline was, OMG IMF. When the Pope started his Facebook account, our headline was, Poke the Pope. So the idea is to convey the information, but do it in a way that has a bit of playfulness to it and some attitude. And we put on a show for our readers. And that's why we started with having multiple stories, and then we stumbled upon the Splash, which has now become a HuffPost feature. And at first, everybody said, no, that's going to be terrible because people won't click below the Splash. And in fact, it's the exact opposite. If you draw people in and they see what's the story this particular hour, you know, next hour it may be another story, then you go further down and look at the other stories. And then the other thing that was another aha moment a year later was that we really can be many sections. You know, we started with one section covering everything. Now we have 66 sections in the US and multiple sections here. And since the merger with AOL, we've launched 44 sections, you know, including divorce, which has been a very popular section, which was the idea of our editor-at-large, Nora Ephron, who said to me one morning, we need to launch a divorce section because marriage comes and goes, but divorce is forever. Don't worry, we're not cynical. We also launched a wedding section a few months after the divorce section. Yes.
Hi, I'm Larry Heath. I run a music and arts publication in Australia. When the Huffington Post started, social media was very much in its infancy. I mean, MySpace was still used. It was probably just starting then too. How has the evolution of social media evolved the way that you approach the Huffington Post editorially?
That's a great question. You know, social has become a big part of what we do editorially, which means using Facebook and Twitter in a very integrated way. We work with both Facebook and Twitter to develop new tools, and we're early adopters and work with them to keep improving them. We launched, for example, a couple of years ago, social news with Facebook, which made it possible for you to see what your friends were reading and made it possible for your friends to see what you are reading or commenting on or blogging on. And then we discovered early on that many people didn't want their friends to know everything that they were reading. So, for example, if they were reading a story on Lindsay Lohan, they didn't maybe want their friends to know about it. Maybe they wanted their friends to think they were only reading stories on Kierkegaard or Tolstoy. I don't know. But the point is that we then developed a stealth button that you could click, which meant that you could look at something and your friends wouldn't know about it. So these are the kind of developments that we've been doing, and a lot of our traffic comes from social. It used to be a third direct, a third SEO, a third social, and now it's over 40% social.
Thank you.
Thanks.
My turn? Okay. My name is Graham, and I actually work for the government. And please don't throw anything. Not the federal one. Not really much of a question, as much of wanting to say thank you for being a great, I guess, aggregator of the progressive voice in the world. And I suspect I may not be the only person in the room who's already done this, but I've taken you up on your challenge and sent you a note. So hopefully,
great.
We'll hear from your staff soon.
Thank you so
very
much. I love that. I really, honestly love that. I just. I have recruited some great bloggers just like that by inviting people to blog, giving my email address, and we've had some amazing stuff on the site as a result. I was recently speaking at the University of at Penn State and having dinner with some students beforehand, and one of them was working on her thesis, and I said, well, you know, when you finish your thesis, you can post on the Huffington Post. She said, oh, that's great. That gives me even more incentive to make it good. And I thought to myself, well, let's start a program to invite students to post their thesis on the Huffington Post. Because just think of it. It's there. It's no extra work. And it often just never sees the light of day. So we launched this in our college section, which has been wonderful. And I remember when a Cornell student committed suicide, and as it happened, one of our editors had been to Cornell and had done his thesis on suicide at Cornell. So we posted his thesis. It crashed the Cornell servers. And suddenly there was a lot of insight and context about this one individual tragic incident. So I'm so optimistic about the intelligence and the creativity that is out there, that I love the fact that we can use the Huffington Post to provide an amplifier for all that. Yes?
Yes, thank you so much for creating all of the channels as well. And that was part of the question that I wanted to ask. You said that you're going to launch a Huffington Weekly. And I'm wondering, was that something that was in the plans for some time? Is there a right time when a new channel or a new effort like that gets put into place? And what are the metrics by which you'll measure what goes in weekly? Will it be strictly by popularity, or will it be edited in a different way?
Actually, this is a new idea. It was an idea by Tim O'Brien, who is our executive editor, who joined us from the New York Times. And he's the editor of this weekly magazine up. And it's going to be by just importance. You know, when I say importance, I don't mean just our big poverty series or our series around college debt or our significant series on for-profit jails or all these things, but also our satirical pieces, our fun blogs, everything. But it's just going to be by in terms of what we consider the best quality stuff we had that week, not necessarily the most popular stuff we had that week.
Was it a recent idea, or was it something that had been planned for a while, but
No.
it wasn't the right time?
No, it was not a recent idea. I mean, that's one of the exciting things, that now that we've grown, a lot of people beyond me have great ideas. And I love facilitating them. And that was, as I said, Tim's idea. And I think he first mentioned it to me 4 months ago. He worked with our Palo Alto engineers to develop the technology, and now we are finalizing things and going to Apple for approvals and all the things we have to do to get a new iPad app launched. And of course, iPad makes it so much easier to develop something that's beautiful and has all these features.
Great, thank you.
Thank you so much. So let me warn you that now this light has gone red. So let's just take these 2 additional questions, because we don't have to strictly follow the rules, right? And then we can continue the conversation online. Yes.
They make these very tall. Hi, I'm Katrina Clear. Thank you so much for speaking today. It's been a real pleasure to see you. I've been a fan for years, and thank you for the shout out at the beginning as well.
Thank you for what you said. I loved it.
Oh, thank you.
I didn't even know you were in the room. That makes it better.
I know. I was all surprised. I'm like, wow, look at that. As you were forming the Huffington Post, because I'm an avid reader, I think it's a wonderful site. Who were the couple of people that inspired you the most? Because I'm sure that every day was not a cakewalk in putting that together. So when you felt like, oh my goodness, this is going to be much harder than I thought, who were the couple of people you found most inspiring to keep following your goal and your dream in that area?
Well, first of all, I had a great co-founder, Kenny Lair. And I think it's great when you launch something to have a co-founder, because as you said, there are hard times. And you can go through them together. When one of you is down, the other one may be up, and you can help each other. And certainly you can help each other through the negative publicity. At the beginning, we had some terrible reviews the day we launched. One of them I have learned by heart. It was by Nikki Fink in the LA Weekly, and she said, "The Huffington Post is an unsurvivable failure. It is the movie equivalent of Gigli, Heaven's Gate, and Ishtar all rolled into one." Then a year later, she emailed me and she said, "I was wrong. HuffPost has become an indispensable part of the internet, and I would like to write for you." And I said, "Great," because the worst thing you can do in life is hold grudges. It's all about next. The GPS for the soul doesn't let you hold grudges. And also, I tell the story because I think it's important for people to realize that if you have a dream and a vision, there are going to be naysayers. Some of the naysayers may be people who really love you, and they think you shouldn't be taking a risk. Because, I mean, after all, I was in my 50s when I launched the Huffington Post. And a lot of my friends said, "Why do you need that? You know, you have your books, you have your career, you have your column. Why do you need to take a risk?" And they would say lovingly, "The internet, dear, is a young person's business." And so that's when you need to just follow your heart and be willing to fail. You know, there are no guarantees. But so what? You know, I think my biggest inspiration in all that, of course, has been my mother, who always, ever since I was a little girl, would say to me, "Failure is not the opposite of success. It's a stepping stone to success." And there is nobody who has succeeded who has not failed along the way, often many, many times. So, and I would love to ask you if we can post your speech. It sounds absolutely great. So if you want to, send it to me.
I absolutely will. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mike Bendixson. I run a radio station in Toronto, News Talk 1010 CFRB. First of all, on behalf of all the shareholders of RIM, thank you very much for carrying 3 Blackberries. And I'm curious how you think social media will play its role in the future with regards to traditional news, breaking news specifically. You know, we all know that 40 minutes, roughly, before the Associated Press went with it, it was on Twitter that Whitney Houston had passed away. And so I'm just curious, as from your point of view, where that's going to go to. Where do you see traditional news and the traditional, hey, we've got to check it with 3 sources, et cetera, and where you think that is going to lead down the road?
Well, I think actually that traditional news is going to be increasingly driven to do more and more around providing context, providing understanding, because they can never compete with social media when it comes to breaking news. Whether it's Whitney Houston's death or accidents or who is going to be nominated for what, somehow it breaks through. But we can and need to provide much more context. And that's really what's been missing. And the understanding and historical understanding. And that's where traditional media can be great. And that's why I don't think it's going to be either or. I think it's going to be a hybrid. And we see that more and more. Thank you. Okay, somebody else stood up. So let's make that the last question.
Thank you. My name is Jacqueline Nwame. I'm with the Canadian Film Centre's Media Lab. I was really taken with your statement in and around the fact that there's a lack of wisdom, and I would love to hear your insight in regards to the Kony 2012 debacle, especially in considering how quickly it went viral in that 1 week, and then the response or lack of response in terms of the validity of the statements that were being made in the video, the fact that people were jumping on a bandwagon without really thinking about what the bandwagon was, and then how at the end of all of this, the voice of the creator being pulled down at the end. And it was a really interesting meme and cycle within a 2-week period that I think is really quite relevant. We haven't really begun to dissect.
No, that's a great point. I mean, again, it was also an instance where new media and traditional media intersected. I mean, right from the beginning, there were big stories in traditional media, challenging some of the claims, questioning some of the things said. At the same time, we saw how quickly something can capture people's imagination and lead to something going crazy viral. And then we are asking the questions, but did it make a difference? What did people do? What are they doing? And again, these are all questions that were raised in this 2-week period that need to be raised about a lot of what goes viral. For me, whenever it is something that shows up an injustice, the key thing is, are we just passing it on, or are we doing something about it? That's going to be key. What can we do, whether it's contributing money or time, or awareness that can lead to the spotlight going on a story and staying there. Because often we are cultures that are so easily distracted, and we really suffer from ADD, attention deficit disorder, that we may be absorbed by something today and then forget it tomorrow. So I think it's a great case study for addressing all these questions and looking at all the impact that social media can have, both incredibly positive and potentially negative. Thank you so much, everybody, and please stay in touch.